as they arrive into the meeting. And also,
we're all set, Skippy. You can go ahead and call it to order.
All right. Well, then, welcome everybody to the June 16th, 2021. We are now literally halfway through June, which is crazy. APCHA, Aspen Pitkin County Housing Authority meeting. Cindy, would you read the roll?
Yes. Carson.
Here.
Rick.
Here.
David.
Here.
Skippy.
Present.
Diane. Oh, not Diane. Kelly.
Here.
Rachel. Rachel.
Hey guys.
And Francie.
Here. I'm here.
I want to make sure I got you. Great.
Beautiful.
And I know John Ward is out.
That's correct. Yep. So we have everybody else, and John will not be joining us today. So we are going to start our meeting, as always, with public comment. It's an opportunity for anyone to speak on anything not on our agenda today. I don't have a list in front of me. I did have one email in, although that person may be here to speak. If not, I can read it into the record. But I invite anyone who wants to speak to unmute yourself, share your first and last name for the record, and then let us know what is on your mind. And we'll give this just a minute because there is a 45-second delay for the broadcast. All right, last chance for public comments. Okay, I did receive one comment via email, and Cindy, let me know if you want me to forward this, but I was asked to read it if they could not show up. It is from Carolyn Porter. Carolyn wanted to make it clear that she's speaking as an individual and her views do not respect Pitkin County, whom she works for in any way. And Carolyn says, fun over force. Livable is a good start, but lovable little spaces would be pretty revolutionary. I really believe we have the resources here to solve this creatively. As a regulator, sometimes more rules, even smart ones, result in more resistance and less compliance. I think the root of the problem is people don't have what they need, financially, physically, environmentally, to truly thrive. The despair of affordable housing is a symptom of being spread far too thin and too far and wide. No secret, but I decided not to play the lottery game because I am a planner and I can't handle the randomness of where I might end up. So I bought a home in West Glenwood since that's what I can afford on my governmental salary. It was the only place suitable for my extended family and my intent to start my own. I suffered from the same fate as many affordable homeowners. I fell in love and put my heart into a home that is a proverbial money pit. Many are faced with, do I now sell my home that continues to increase in value regardless of the work I put in? Or do I continue to serve this community, work my butt off outside and inside of the home, and trust I will not be exiled? That we will eventually get what we need as a community in order to serve everyone the best way we can. So that is Carolyn Porter via email. Anyone else who has popped down and want to give public comment? I don't see anyone, so I'm going to end the public comment portion of our meeting and move to executive director or staff comments. And yes, you may share your screen if desired.
You beat me to it.
I'm getting used to this now.
Hold on. Let's just organize my screen over here so I can see all of you. There we go. I am happy to report that we have 3 outstanding finalists for the APCHA executive director role. The interview panel was unanimous in its selection of these 3 finalists, and we will likely be issuing a press release with the names and some information on these individuals tomorrow or Friday, probably Friday at the latest. We'll be sure to get you a copy of that as well. I will be en route to a camping weekend, so it if it's a little bit disjointed as far as when you get it versus when we make the release. It's my intention to get it to the board first, however, just know that that may be a little bit of a hiccup. And as you know, the candidates will each be making a presentation to the APCHA board, and it's a public meeting, so the public's welcome to attend, and also APCHA staff are invited. We do have a, I will be sending out a link to the APCHA board and a separate one to the APCHA staff to get specific feedback. It'll be a Survey Monkey, and I will ask you to do it that evening because I'd like to get the decision makers in this are the hiring managers per the intergovernmental agreement are Sarah Ott and John Peacock as the respective city manager and county manager. Sorry, John. Lost my train of thought. Sorry about that. The candidates presenting, the format will be that they'll do probably a 5 to 10 minute introduction of themselves and their work history. They're all accomplished folks with prior government experience, and it's wonderful that they all bring something different to the table as far as skills and abilities and backgrounds. And then we'll have a Q&A. I will ask if you have any questions, please send them to me as soon as possible. I'd like to get those all ready and organized by Monday of next week. So if you do have questions, please do send them to me. I'll be facilitating the Q&A. We won't have a chat or specific Q&A, and I'll also be providing an email address for the public to provide feedback as well in that process. Do folks have any questions about the process?
Questions for Diane, looking for hands. Not seeing any. Diane, a few quick questions, mostly for the watchers. When is the time and date of that meeting that the public can watch / participate in?
Oh, I've got to pull up a different screen. It's this coming Wednesday, the 23rd. I believe its start time is 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
If I am not mistaken. Yeah.
It's on the 23rd at 6
to about
p.m.
7 something. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you know we can't see your schedule. Okay, so 6 p.m. next Wednesday. How will people get the email address to send in questions?
We'll just provide that at the meeting.
Oh, so we'll be able to do it during the meeting.
Oh, sorry, no, sorry. Let me be clear, Skippy. I'm not collecting questions from the public. I'm absolutely want to collect any questions the board may have. I do have a set of kind of questions that we would ask someone in this kind of leadership role. However, if the board has specific questions, I'm happy to take those, and I will include as many as I can. My experience in doing this in the past is some person may send 15 questions, and just given a 20-minute time frame, we're not going to be able to ask that many. The intention is that you get a good sense of who that candidate is and a little bit about who they are.
Got it. That makes sense. Kelly, I see you there. I would just say for anyone watching in the public, although there's not an opportunity to share a question directly or guarantee it gets answered, if you have a question and you know a board member, feel free to ask it of us. You can use us as the filter to see if we can get that question answered. And if you don't know a board member, you can send them on to me. It'll just be skippy.mesirow@cityofaspen.com, and it's available on the city website as well. Kelly.
Hi, Diane. Will you share any of like their resume or application materials ahead of time?
Yes, the board will provide some information. Courtney DeVito, Denise White, who's the city's comms director, and Denise is coordinating with the county's comms director, Laura Armstrong. They are working on that press release, so we will likely include at least kind of what they're doing now in that press release. I've already got the email set up to go to the board that will include, you will receive both their cover letter and their resume, and you'll receive that on Tuesday afternoon around 4 p.m. I think is how I have it set up. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, do you have other stuff to move on to, Diane?
I do. This one is a request for funding from the APCHA board. So as you know, Cindy had a home inspection conducted by a local professional home inspector, and it came up with a long list of things that repairs that need to be done. Some of them are normal wear and tear. Some of them are, there's a very large window on the, I think it's the south side of the home on the second floor, where I think a rock hit the window, but it didn't, it's a double pane window, and it didn't go through the second pane, so there's no air coming in, but that one of those panes needs to be replaced. That's gonna be an expensive window. My guess is they'll probably replace both of them. And then we have other things like little repairs to things that are loose, and then there's an unfinished hot tub room, and it's concrete, it's built into the floor concrete, all the plumbing is in, and we're evaluating, and we wanna work with a contractor to evaluate, is it going to be more cost effective to finish that out or to fill it in with concrete? It has standing water in it now, so we don't feel like it's one we can just leave as is. So we've got a number of things to do. We believe that the repairs are going to be in the $100,000 to $150,000. I am asking board authorization not to exceed $200,000. Initially, we thought we were going to have to make a request, but Cindy's done some work this week with the city's finance department, and we actually do have enough money to cover this in APCHA's 632 fund, over which you have authorization. And so this is simply a request of the board. Are you okay if we do that? Once we make those repairs, we will repay the 632 fund by adding the actual cost of the repairs to the maximum sales price.
Any questions?
Carson?
Thanks, Diane. I was just curious, have you had interest in people wanting to acquire this property?
We have. Cindy said people started to call as early as a couple days after Mr. Mulcahy moved out.
Great.
And having been in the property, it has, I think, some of the best views in town, and it's a fabulous single-family home in a great location for a quite competitive price.
Thank you.
Diane, am I correct in remembering that the max price of $995 is where it would start? So if this was $155, then we would end up selling it for $1.15. Is that accurate?
Yeah, $995, $998, right around there, exactly.
No, Diane?
Yeah.
Diane, we can actually take the appreciated value from the day you got the certificate of occupancy and add the appreciation back on, plus what we spend on it. So we can even add more than that.
Great, I forgot about that piece, Cindy. Thank you for adding that.
Right.
Carson, do you still have your hand up, or is that old hand?
Get out of here.
That's an old hand.
You know what I'd say about that window, Diane? What a pain.
Wow, okay, Ward. Rachel, you had a question?
I'm ever so sorry, I'm having trouble finding the hand button. But what I was wondering is it possible to recover any of the attorney fees as well and some of the other losses that the APCHA budget suffered?
I think that's what Cindy's suggesting, is that we can actually take advantage of the appreciation, and I had forgotten that. Cindy has let me know about that piece. So I think we will absolutely, Rachel, look to that, because still at even a $1.5 million, it's still a very good deal, and the square footage is quite good, and there's a garage, and it's a perfect location in a neighborhood.
And Rachel, what I would do is I would look at what all of our costs have been that we were not recouped, and I will try to figure out if it makes sense to list it at that price, and we will let you guys know.
Absolutely, thank you.
Any other questions? Anything else, Diane?
No, I think I'm just asking, I am asking for a thumbs up or a formal okay, because these are board funds. So Cindy, you can guide me on this one. Would this, if we're expending board funds, would it be a roll call or just a thumbs up okay?
No, I need to bring back a resolution at the next board meeting.
On
Got
zero,
it. Yep.
a vote, so why don't we just read the roll to approve it, and someone can make a motion.
Sorry,
No,
sorry,
no,
Skippy,
you
I
can't at
forgot.
this meeting.
Cindy, sorry, Skippy, I don't know if you heard Cindy, we actually need to bring back a resolution, so at this point, I'm looking for a thumbs up. We need to bring back a formal resolution to do that expenditure. Great.
Okay.
I think we're good there, and that's it for me on today's update. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Very excited to meet the candidates. Okay, we will be moving on to our consent calendar, which is the minutes of June 2nd. I would accept a motion to adopt or amend.
I move to approve the minutes.
Mike, we have a second. I think that's a second from Kelly. Cindy, could you read the roll, please?
Yes. Skippy,
Yes.
Kelly? Kelly?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Carson?
Yes.
And David?
Yes.
Thank you.
Beautiful. So moving right along, we will move into the second reading and public hearing, so opportunity for public comment for the approval of resolution number 4, which is adopting amendments to our employee housing regulations. Staff is going to lead us through this one block at a time, asking for any last alterations or changes. We'll then do public comment, and then we can circle back around for discussion prior to a vote on hopefully. So I'll let you guys take it away, staff.
Thanks, Skippy. Good evening, everyone, or good afternoon, I suppose. Maddie's going to share a screen. Maddie, I'll just kind of walk you through it. So the first part, the transfers outside the bid process, APCHA staff recommended pausing this regulation, and we will bring it back at a later time, so that is not reflected in these regulations. Skippy, do you want me to ask questions after each one, or just go through them all?
Break this up as each one, so if anyone has any questions or comments on that. I don't see any, and I just want to be clear for the board and for the public. In here it says pause, but you just characterized as will come back, which is, I think, all of our expectation and what we had discussed, and I'm putting this out just to make sure we're all on the same page. The suggestion that Rachel had made was ultimately we want to maximize use, and so we'd like to get to filling all bedrooms, but perhaps there's a more elegant way to do that in which somebody, rather than filling the, let's say, 4-bedroom home that they would inherit by themselves, or filling it with roommates, etc., they would have some form of opportunity to get a 1-bedroom place, for instance. And that at some point in the nearest future, some other fix will come back to the board. Is that what we all recall, and is that what staff had heard?
I can jump in for staff, but I don't want to cut off any board members.
Well, Rachel, I'm characterizing your recommendation, so if it's incorrect, please correct it.
As I remember it in the conversation, and I appreciate the larger conversation we had for the record for first reading, that yes, we do want to find a way to maximize the occupancy of units, and we don't want to see units passed along that will, result essentially in a permanent vacancy or things like that. I had suggested that we try to look at something that could create some equity, that the inheritor, if they qualify via all the other policies, perhaps they can get the first available unit that comes up that's suitable to them. But as Skippy and I think as staff has recognized, that's a much longer work session. There's always equities about people who've been losing those same types of lotteries and not being in line. But the value, of course, would be to return a larger unit to the inventory that's in need as well. So I support spending a little more time on it, and I think it just leaves the existing policy in place. So, we'll have to see how long we can let that run before we are able to make a change.
Beautiful, thank you. The expectation is something along those lines will come back from staff, unless I hear any other board members who want to offer a contrasting view right now. I'll look for a hand for that.
Skippy, I don't think there's a contrasting view, but I think another big conversation topic from the fellow board members was the idea that we need to look at the provision that what happens during when there's a death of an owner and how that's transferred. I think David was talking about that, and so staff is preparing to bring back both of those provisions at some point in the future, and look at those cohesively and try to align them, because I think that was a big request as well from the rest of the board.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, seeing no hands up, then we have marching orders for A, which I think will be a big improvement as it comes back.
Okay, so the next piece, the listing agreement and inspection. Maddie, if you can jump to the actual language, so page 36, and I'll walk through the memo, that would be fantastic. So as Maddie's going there, the things that we covered in the board meeting is in the memo is, we have added in the conversation that we talked about requiring a professional inspector instead of a licensed inspector. The goal from staff right now is to keep this program simple, and there's additional elements that we are sure are going to crop up as this moves forward.
The small.
And that we're not going to require an inspection at point of refinancing at the moment, just because we're trying to keep this simple, and then we'll approach that down the road, but certainly not something that we don't want to talk about in the future. So the updated verbiage that will be in the regulations is what's on the screen in front of you. Starting August 1st, sellers must sign a listing agreement with APCHA. The inspection will be paid for by APCHA. APCHA will maintain a copy of the report, and this inspection is for determining compliance with the minimum livability and life safety standards. And then we did include a list that is limited to, it's not limited to. So it could be more as something pops up or an inspector, advises us on something. Certainly we're going with what we've seen in prior inspection reports. Happy to answer any questions on this. Rachel?
Yes, thank you. I'm going to support this going forward, and I understand staff's reasons for wanting to keep it simple, and I certainly can endorse that as well. I really just need to say for the record that I think the refinancing process is a challenge for us, because the appraisal, as you know, the banks won't give you the loan without the appraisal. The appraiser calls housing office and says, what's the maximum resale value? You give them a number, and then they might be taking out 100% loan for all we know. And they might spend all that before they go to sell, and we might not be able to get any blood out of the turnip. And so that, I think, is a real challenge. And it also builds in a false expectation for that homeowner going forward, that I was just told by the appraiser who got the number from APCHA that this is my maximum resale value. And maybe we need to be able to put a footnote in there when we give it to the appraiser, but that might, further upset refinancing issues. That's something Carson and John Ward would know more about. but it really is not an exact amount, even though we're telling the appraiser it is. Thank you.
Rachel, just a quick comment. Thank you for that email earlier today and this comment. I believe you're absolutely correct. We're in a situation right now as staff where we've got somebody who's borrowed more on their house than even the maximum resale value, and we can't imagine how a bank let that happen, and it happened. And so I do think kind of the moving forward, you'll see staff looking at, can we add that to a deed restriction, that it's required that they notify us if they're refinancing? Is there something we can put that a lender associated specifically with the property that a lender will see? Because we could put it in the regs that they're required to do it, put it in the APCHA regulations. Well, it needs to be something that the lender is going to be seeing, and I really appreciate you bringing this up. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to support both Rachel and Diane's suggestions. It sounds like, you know, as regulations develop with standards for sellers, language in there to address this, and in the deed restriction that lenders will see seems really imperative.
Thanks, Kelly. And I know Diane and I have both taken notes on that, and we'll continue to keep this at the forefront and work towards it. So. If there's no other questions, I'll have Maddie jump to page 47. Page 47 talks about leave of absence additions. An owner is allowed to be on a leave of absence for at most 24 months during a 10-year period. Happy to answer any questions on that. Okay, with no questions, I'll jump to page 54. Maddie?
Rachel, sorry, Rachel, did you have a question?
It's just kind of a footnote. If someone just goes on a leave of absence on their own without notifying you, and you find out later it's just a basic violation of the policies, and we have other rules that apply to that.
Yeah, and a lot of what we do is, I would say 95% of people let us know beforehand, very far beforehand usually. The ones that it's unplanned, we might find out a couple months in, and then we retroactive that leave of absence to the start date that they actually left their unit, to count for that time. Usually we see that if it's a family emergency or something happened and the owner ended up being away longer than they had anticipated.
And there's no freezing of appreciation during the time period that you are in a leave of absence or anything like that, is there?
So the second year is a frozen appreciation. So if, for example, someone is gone for that second year and then decides instead of returning to the value, they would like to sell their unit, we give them the appreciation from basically 12 months prior, the value, excuse me, not the appreciation. We give them the value. They are notified that 12-month period is a frozen appreciation.
Thank you. I think that's appropriate.
The great part is the new home truck system can calculate all of that for us. So take some of the math out of the situation.
Great. Very good.
Maddie, I'm going to have you jump to page 50.
All right, hang on, Bethany. Sorry, I'm seeing a hand from Francie.
Thanks, Francie.
Sorry, I got a gallery view going. Thanks.
I don't have a gallery view, so thank you. I have 4. So
I did find my hand raised eventually.
Great.
So you guys probably know the answer to this, all of you except for me, but so if when the owner is gone, they can rent it out, and do they have to rent it out to a Pitkin County employee?
Yes. So if an owner is going on a leave of absence, they have a choice to rent it out. I would also say probably 95% rent their unit out. That they have to work with APCHA to set rental price. So it's either the amount that's updated annually in the regulations, or the owner can provide to APCHA all of their documents, such as mortgage statement, HOAs, taxes, and we will come up with an amount that is equal to what they're paying out. And then the tenant has to be qualified through APCHA prior to move-in, so it's the same application. The tenant does not have to meet the asset or income level, but they have to be an employee of Pitkin County, and they can't own other property.
But they can just be a friend or a sibling or something of the person. They don't have to go through the whole list.
No, and we don't,
lottery.
tenant, we don't want to be involved in the choosing process. That's up to the owner to make that choice, and then that individual has to just be qualified with APCHA.
Okay, thank you so much.
And just to finish it off, that tenant cannot purchase, they're not first in line to purchase the unit. So if that owner decided to sell the unit, the tenant that is in there does not have any super priority to that unit, and we have the tenant sign a document that, and the owner, so that all the parties understand that that tenant has no special priority.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Maddie, you're going to page 54, and Diane, thank you. If you can help me out, or Skippy, whoever is the gallery view, that would be great.
Yeah, I will do that, no problem.
So this is maximum sales price, 54, Maddie. Oh, thanks. Or maybe 60, I apologize. You were right, this didn't get updated, so I apologize. So this says that sales prices will be lowered by 10% in compliance cases every 6 months if a unit doesn't sell. And this is for units not sold through APCHA. And so there's already a provision for units that are sold through APCHA for a similar clause. Right now, we don't have any units that have been sitting on the market, but there certainly have been a couple that have been sold for higher prices than they're likely worth, allowing the owner who is out of compliance to maintain that unit longer than they should. And I'll take any questions, but at this point, if there are none, Skippy, I am done, and you can open it up to public comment if you would like.
Looking for any hands? Not seeing any. Okay. It means we did a good job at first reading. Great. So this is a public hearing. So this is an opportunity for anyone from the public to comment on any of the above, and I welcome you to do so. You can simply unmute yourself, state your first and last name for the record, and have at it. There is a 45-second delay here, so we'll give it just a moment to make sure everyone has an opportunity. I do see Carolyn on the line. Carolyn is who I read in the comments for earlier, but Carolyn, you are welcome. It's a separate part of the meeting to speak to this if you would like. If so, just unmute yourself. I think the thumbs up means yes. Why don't you unmute yourself and say your name and let us know what's on your mind. And you are still on mute and we cannot see you. While Carolyn figures that out, is there anyone else who would like to say anything? Carolyn, it's just you. What you got?
Skippy, she might have just been okay, not yes, she wanted to talk. I don't know. I don't know my symbols very well.
And if you are just okay, would you unmute to say as much so we don't miss you here? I know it's ironic if you're frozen, but.
Sorry, I have a noisy toddler in the background, so I'm not really available to speak, but thank you.
All right, thank you. Great, well then we'll close the public comment section and we'll circle back for board discussion. Hands up for any final thoughts, or of course we can accept a motion to approve. Hands. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I move to approve.
Is that acceptable, Cindy, or does he have to read out the statement?
If you would go to page 2 of the memo, or the number 7 of the packet, down at the bottom is the recommendation that I need read.
And may David do this as an alternate?
Yes, because John Ward is not here, so he can.
Making sure.
Where am I going?
To page 7, it's the large 7 on the bottom right,
Okay.
and then it's in bold at the bottom.
I move to approve a second reading and public hearing held June 16, 2021, resolution number 4, series of 2021, adopting amendment to the Aspen Pitkin employee housing regulations.
I'll second that motion.
All right, we have a first from David and a second from Rick. Cindy, would you read the roll?
Yes. Skippy.
Yes.
Kelly.
Yes.
Rick.
Yes.
David.
Yes.
Carson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Well done, guys. That's really good work. Beautiful. Well, we're going to move expeditiously and right along into the next part of our meeting, which is the standards for sellers. Just to set the table a little bit here, I just wanted to really take the time to celebrate everyone on the board for getting here. This is the first big, hairy, audacious goal, as they say, that we've taken on, and there's been some sausage making. And that's how this stuff works. But each of you has made some really, really significant contributions to getting us here. And this will be a transformational change for the program. What we are hoping to do today is not approve everything, right? We're just trying to get this in a place where staff can take it and turn it into something actionable for first reading, for public comment, for second reading, and finally for approval. So Diane's going to break this up into 4 pieces, and we'd like to get to consensus, not perfect agreement, but consensus on these things. Staff is looking for sort of the broader framework, right? So they are looking for, right, making sure that we're focused on livability standards and not aesthetics. They're not looking for is livability standards means 1/4 inch or 1/8 inch of carpet. We will have an opportunity to review all of those detail things when this comes back for first reading. So we'll have plenty of time to get into all of those details for the public to comment on them, to work on them, but we want to give a head nod to staff that none of us are going to oppose this or not be able to support this with the broad construct that results from today. Does that make sense before we move forward to staff, or does anyone have any questions about what we're hoping to accomplish today? Beautiful. Great. Then, Diane, I will turn it over to you to take this chunk by chunk.
Great. And to follow on with what Skippy said, I actually think that I know you know this, I do want to highlight though, that the piece that you just adopted in the regulations of home inspections is part and parcel of this capital seller standards capital repairs program. And it's a really important step. Let's say if for some reason it wasn't possible to get anything done in the next year for some unknown reason, that alone has added a level of transparency to the process that absolutely will add some more market factors into this process. So I do want to acknowledge that that's a big step forward. And while it may have been easier, it was not an easy one to get to. So thank you for your work with staff on that. Seller standards capital repairs. As this is in your packet, and as Skippy described this in good detail, I do want to make it clear that this is one of those. I think Jim Collins calls it BHAG, big, hairy, audacious. Well, he uses goals, but Big Hairy, this one's a big hack, which is a big, hairy, audacious challenge. And because this program, as Rachel's pointed out in the discussions that I've had with her before, right? Every piece is interrelated. So while I've been trying to take you through this piecemeal, we also have to recognize that things may get missed and fall through the cracks if we only approach it piecemeal. So I'm stepping back on this one and looking to get a general direction from the board, because as you know, we probably, I think we all feel, and I've heard it from some board members as well, that we're probably a little short-staffed at APCHA. There's not like extra time in any day. And the fact that we don't have someone who can go and do a ton of research on all this and lay out the details on every single option. So what I'm proposing here is that we pick a focus and we go down that path. Now, I had some wonderful emails from Rachel and also from Tom Smith today that pointed out some, there may be holes that we could drive a truck through. However, I don't want to spend time looking at every option and every hole. Let's start down a path and see if we can figure out how could we do that program. And before it gets codified, bring that back to the board, tell you what's good about it, what's bad about it, how we think we can mitigate the items that are bad, and if we recommend this still. So one example, we may not be able to get local contractors who want to work at a discount, right? We're building a house here. Every time we go out and ask for a new bed on structurally insulated panels, the price goes up. So that may not be a reality. We absolutely want to explore that, though, if that's the way the board wants to go, because we do have buying power at APCHA, right? That's one distinction. So with that, are there questions on what I'm asking of you today? Great. This is in your packet. I know this is hard to read as this one. I wanted to remind you, I'm showing you this slide because this first one in yellow, this is the one that you just did. We're updating the regulations. The next question for tonight will be about estimating cost of capital repairs. The next question about who does the repairs and kind of where are those people, by whom are those people employed? And then put down as the third question for tonight, the who pays question. And I do want to thank Cindy for doing a bunch of math for me, because I realized that short of seeing an example, it was difficult to imagine, well, what does that look like in reality?
And
so
if anyone,
that,
an easier way to follow along, page 78 of your packet has these broken down as well.
Great. Here's the first question. The cost to complete capital repairs, sorry, I got text coming in and emails coming in. On the board survey, and I'll quickly just go to this slide. This was how should the cost of capital improvements work to the standard it needs to get done. And then alternatives being APCHA contracts with an outside firm that could provide estimates. And also then staff, we could hire a staff member to do the estimating. All right, I'm going to stop there, and this was the preferred option from the board, and I will hand it over to Skippy for the board to discuss. Thank you.
Guys, just so you are aware, I lost power in my building, so I have tethered to my phone, and I am back, but I did miss the last 20 seconds, and Rachel's calling, so I'm guessing she's lost power too. Give me 1 second.
Here? Oh, that's interesting.
Skippy, when you get a sec, can you confirm your Holy Cross, and I'll get a hold of Bill Lynn?
I can't tell you if I'm Holy Cross or not, but I am right up against Aspen Mountain and 5th Avenue condos, so 50-50. Rachel, what were you saying?
I'm Holy Cross, but the other thing is that it.
So Rachel is Holy Cross as well, Diane. Please just bear with us for 1 second, everybody else. And Diane, if you could check if the GrassRoots feed is still going and if we're still recording. Let's take a 90-second pause. Let me work with Rachel, and then we'll get right back.
Cindy, do you have an ability to tell if GrassRoots is broadcasting?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
they're broadcasting.
Oh,
And we're still recording as well.
You're going to be, yeah, you're going to be on City Power.
Yeah. Holy Cross probably just went out.
I hate that. I have Holy Cross. God, it's another fire.
I don't think so.
It's too hot for our electrical lines to handle, obviously.
They're having a hard time the past couple of days. Hey. Hi.
Hi.
Should be okay. Okay.
And while I definitely want to do this meeting and we're absolutely prepared for it, I did just have that feeling of a little kid on a snow day.
All right, back here, Rachel is just going to scooter over to City Hall, and she will be back on in 10 minutes. David Loughran also lost power, so let me just quick call him as well. Give us another 90 seconds here.
Dang. Bad day to be on Holy Cross. Let's check. Let's see what's up. Yeah, it looks like it overheated, probably.
Okay, Diane.
Skippy, I'm just on the phone with Bill Lynch trying to figure out if anything's going on.
Great, can I just say one thing? Can you just
Hang on one sec, Bill. Hang on,
So
Bill.
David and Rachel are both going to go to City Hall. What I'd like to do is just take a 20-minute break to let them get set up. You can figure out power. Let's all take a break and come back to this meeting at 5:10. We'll have plenty of time, and we can just get going then and re-kick on GrassRoots. Sound good?
Do you want us to leave the meeting and come back in later, or just put up?
Don't you? Yeah, Diane, you are muted, so we couldn't hear you. But anyone, you can just put yourself on mute, turn off your video. That's what I'm going to do. I'll stay in the thing, and we'll come back at 5:10. Diane, does that sound good to you? You were muted.
No, it sounds good. I was just saying we were way ahead of schedule on the regulations, so we're good. Thank you.
We'll see everyone at 5:10. No sweat. Enjoy the walk. you guys let me know.
Skippy, you can start.
GrassRoots. Okay, beautiful. Welcome back. Thank you for letting us problem solve. As some of you have noticed, the power is out in some places. Hopefully we will get through this before anyone's computer dies. If need be, we will come back at a later date. So with expeditiousness in mind, Diane, would you lead us through these discussions? And let's not miss anything important. It didn't mean that by expeditious.
Skippy, my computer just froze and I'm back and I did not hear what you said. So if you needed me to do something, let me know.
Yes, this would be the time where you lead us through these checkboxes.
Awesome. Right before we lost power, I'd gone through this one from the board survey. I double checked. I was going to fix the presentation while, oh, I'm not sharing my screen. Sorry, let me share my screen.
Okay.
Trying to pull up.
Share screen. All right. So I was going to fix this slide. It actually turns out this was the right slide. Is the first question is how should that process of estimating how much the repair should cost? How should that happen? This was the first one was basically have the inspector do it. Second one was have the seller get bids, and then the third one was APCHA hires a staff member to do the bidding. This one has the seller doing getting the bids, and then verifying that through an APCHA staff member who's got some experience in reviewing bids. And so I'd like to hand this back to the board. Thank you.
Beautiful. So the question before us, again, details will be forthcoming, but what we're looking for is, yes, this general approach works. I can support this moving forward. So what I'd be looking for here is hand raises for questions or suggestions to change. Otherwise, if we're all in agreement, then we need to say nothing and staff can take this as direction.
And to be more specific, what staff would do with this particular one is we would talk to HR and try to figure out, we would likely bring this back as a package with other ones, but we would figure out, like, what does it actually cost to get a staff person like this, and how easy is it to get? Can that staff person do other things if they're not 100% doing this? Like, could we get someone who does estimating and also do maintenance, for example? Thank you.
Perfect. I have a hand up from Rachel.
Yeah, thank you, Skippy. Just a kind of a question. I think it's relevant to the answer here, but will the seller have an option of now you know what you have to do, you get the bids, you have to do it, and then we'll list your unit for sale and start showing it? Or can that number be like, okay, it's going to be $20,000 worth of repairs. That $20,000 is in escrow for the new owner to choose any or use. I'm just kind of wondering, when does the work have to be completed? And it's just that issue of, well, you know, if it's in the future and it's just an allocation, maybe they get some really low ball estimates. If it's not, you know, they may do the work to a certain quality, but it really, again, it's not the same choices that the new buyer themselves would make, and there may be some things they rip out right away.
Right. Great questions. When will work be completed? That is both a, we anticipate, let me go to the second question first, which is, when would you sell the property? I think what we would bring back is once the estimate, once the home inspection and the cost estimates have been established, we've established maximum sales price, I think at that point we could probably list, and then the work can be completed. I think that's one of those, we're going to bring the board a proposal that says, this is what we recommend as staff, and it may be, we've started these discussions as staff, but we definitely haven't had the level of discussion that we need to bring to you yet. But we would bring that, we have had that discussion about giving the buyer some say in this and some agency, really. So that's a to be determined, absolutely. And to prevent the low ball, that's why we would hire a staff member to review the bids. We need somebody who knows construction, because that is most definitely a concern. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kelly?
Yeah, I guess I would just make the language a little consistent here and maybe say something by qualified contractors, similar to what we say about who's doing the work. Because I could see a situation where we have people who are in units who are qualified contractors that could bid on their own, you know, on the work of their own unit, and also folks who maybe are savvy and talented but are not qualified contractors who could create a bid for the work on their own unit too, and we might want to distinguish those apart. And then, you know, thinking of just some unintended consequences about kind of the timeliness of all this stuff. You know, these things, just looking at today's environment, these things could all, each step here could take a really long time. And so when I'm playing this real scenario out in my head, you know, I guess I'm wondering if there's ways to kind of build efficiencies here, or to, you know, as Rachel was suggesting, credit for the buyer, who would then have a certain period of time to complete the work, that would help make up for long lags of time that the seller might experience. Thanks.
Kelly, that's a really good point. In the detailed, I think it's, I can't remember which appendix it is, but in that where staff has detailed what that proposal was, we did propose that the buyer would have up to a year to complete those. So if the home is livable, right, and we're going to know that upon listing. And this is one of those where at staff, you know, even on the home inspections, as once we got direction from the board that, yes, we think we want to go down that path, we were able to then have those more in-depth discussions and then bring back to the board the pros and cons, et cetera. So that what you just talked about will also be part of that. You're absolutely right. We don't want to slow this down. Thank you.
Carson.
Yeah, so, I mean, so I'm just thinking through this. So you got a buyer and a seller. Seller has two of their friends give them low bids for $20,000 worth of work, and then the buyer buys the house and they can't find anybody to do it for less than $40,000. I mean, what's the recourse for the buyer at that point? And I mean, I like Kelly's suggestion of the qualified contractor, but I mean, I think everybody knows a qualified contractor. I mean, I guess, and since this situation for a reduction in any cost would only apply if the seller didn't cure those items, I'm just wondering if maybe one of the bids should be, rather than both bids by the seller, one should be by the buyer. If this only would apply if the seller didn't cure the items identified by the inspector. I don't know, just thinking what would be the recourse to the buyer if they couldn't actually get the work performed for that cost.
And Carson, that's absolutely a concern. One of the things, and I'll just use this as a time to I should step back and say, what I'm specifically looking for at this point, and I'm taking notes, Bethany and Cindy are taking notes. These are good input. However, what we're looking for at this point is not necessarily that kind of detail, because we're going to bring that back to you and hopefully have some of those discussions at a staff level.
bring it to you and say pros and cons, and this is how we would solve this one. At a high level, that is why we would have an APCHA staff member to review bids, so we would avoid low balls, or if we include a buyer, that person sandbagging and getting a really high bid. At this point, the question I think that I'm, not that I think that I'm asking, that I'm definitely asking is this the way you want to go as a board, or do you want to see if APCHA can find a firm that can do estimating, or do you want APCHA to hire a full-time staff member to do the estimating? Those people exist.
Kirsten, do you want to?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, so great, wonderful, perfect. I mean, my opinion is I think this is the way to go. You would handle it, try and keep it as close to a regular real estate transaction as possible. Inspector identified these items, cure them, or we're reducing the sales price. I mean, to me, that just seems like the most efficient way to do this. And as long as there is some sort of third-party check, maybe, for fairness and from buyer and seller. I mean, there could even be some negotiation of, to Rachel's point, what if the seller wants to cure things, but the buyer, says, well, hey, it's going to cost $20,000, but we'll accept 15 if you let us make some of the decisions. I mean, I think just keeping it to where there could be, keeping it to the way a free market real estate transaction works, I think would be the most efficient. Thanks.
Yes, and Carson, because you brought that up, I do want to remind the whole board, we are, based on Carson's suggestion a couple meetings ago, we are bringing back that ability for someone to request a home inspection, even if they're not planning on selling. And I also wrote a note down about, I'm not sure we want to provide the owner an opportunity to cure at time of sale, because there's incredible incentive to get the work done as cheaply as possible. The inspection for people who aren't considering selling right now is going to help with that issue, but I think that's got to be a point of discussion as well, is do you want sellers to be able to cure it themselves? Thinking about your unit, they put a bunch of cotton balls behind the wall and seemingly cure it, but the problem still exists. Thanks.
Thanks, Diane. Francie?
I think that between everything that you guys are talking about in terms of inspections and work done and checking inspections and all the different levels of work that you're going to be contracting, I think we do have a full-time employee here that would be somebody who was both a contractor and a licensed, I think the expression is, inspector. And I think the adverse side of having somebody on staff like that is that people would say that the judgments were skewed in favor of APCHA or something weird like that, some kind of public reaction to having an employee on staff. But I certainly think you have enough of a job description here to have a full-time employee working for APCHA to get a lot of this work done. Thank you, Francie. And so I'm clear, clarifying question. I'm hearing from you that you like this option of that bids are done by either the seller or buyer. We'll get clear on that one. And then someone at APCHA is reviewing it instead of APCHA doing the straight up estimating. Is that what I'm hearing? Or do you want to have an APCHA staff member who does the estimations? No, I was thinking of a full-time staff member who does the estimation, contracts the labor, and, just does the work. I don't know how much work we're going to incur at one time, which is kind of a complication. I don't think we realize yet what that's going to look like. But even if it were just one every once in a while, we would have the inspections in between. I don't know, it just seems like constantly contracting out to other people, especially with the delays that we're seeing with contractors in all fields of house ownership and construction and everything, that it might be in our best interest to have an employee who can do a lot of these jobs. I don't know whether we could include estimating, appraisal in that, but possibly.
Before we leave this topic, Rachel, did you want to comment on Francie's suggestion?
You know, I was just thinking that perhaps if the language said that the seller must get 2 bids, but if the buyer has already been established at that point, perhaps create a provision where the buyer can get an independent bid as well if they'd like, if they don't think either the 2 bids are going to be sufficient to cover the work or whatever. But, you know, maybe that could be a provision that, you know, if the 2 estimates are not satisfactory to the future buyer as really being sufficient to make the repairs, that they can get an independent inspection as well. It's just a thought.
I think in this model, this particular model, we're talking about the estimates being done before the maximum sales, before the actual sales price is set and before the listing is done, because we're not going to know what the sales price is until, and obviously we're going to have to go down to number 3, and these will, as you pointed out, they're all related, which is the who pays. Because if we're going to add anything to the maximum sales price, we need to establish that before listing. So in this particular model, it has the bids and estimations being done prior to listing, and an APCHA staff member saying, are these bids real or not real before the listing. Thank you.
Support that. Thank you, Diane.
And before I leave, Francie has proposed that we consider alternative B over here, hire a staff member experienced in estimating. That would likely speed the process. And before we go off of that, and Carson, did you want to comment on that, or do you want to move to a different topic?
I think that's a great idea. I don't want to derail the conversation. I guess my input on that would be, and this is not a conversation we're having now, and I don't want to go down this road. I just want to mention it, but you know, I feel like if we're looking at hiring someone for that position, I feel like it should be part of maybe a bigger picture view, and maybe having somebody on staff to try and provide some below market services to HOAs or to homeowners or whatever. So. Again, I know that's not the conversation we're having now, but I feel like if we're looking at adding a staff member, maybe some of the things that staff member could do, we could find enough things to do for that to be a full-time position.
Yeah, and Carson, right? That is it is the next topic we're going to take on, so you're not hugely off. And I think even though the board, at least from the straw poll, the preference was use local contractors willing to provide a discount. There were a number of people who thought we should hire, that APCHA should hire staff to do those repairs. Let me go back to I'm going to put Francie's question back on the table, and Skippy, you had your hand up, and then Kelly. Francie's proposal that instead of getting bids and then having a staff member evaluate it, that we hire a staff member to do the estimating. And obviously that person's going to have close ties to the construction industry.
Kelly had her hand up first. So go ahead, Kelly, and then I'll.
Sorry.
Yeah, I guess I have some concerns about hiring someone to do the bids and the work. Just, you know, I think it creates liability for APCHA, and it makes us a point of, you know, attack and criticism from people who will be dissatisfied with what they learn and hear. So there is just a benefit to like a free market effort providing that information that I think behooves us to take advantage of and to avoid kind of any being involved in any of that liability, I think.
And Kelly, if I carve off the piece that is doing the repairs, we're talking about just the estimating, is what you stated still hold true, that it's better to have the free market do those?
Yeah, I think it's just hard to divorce them.
Okay, Skippy?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on Francie's point as it relates to both 1 and 3, and then we can, straw poll. Francie, I understand your suggestion, and I understand it as trying to get to a place where we have control over this entire process so that we can ensure quality. And I think that's the right goal. And we're getting something new off the ground here. And so I think if we can ensure control and quality while leveraging existing free market individuals, I think we're better served in doing that. It's faster, easier, more efficient, cheaper to start. And we'll have an opportunity to observe that process. If it's not going well, I think then the next step is to bring that stuff in-house, but that we don't necessarily need to preempt that step. And so that relates to here on 1. So I would support what staff has on the table with all of the qualifications requests that have been made by everyone else. And the same is true when we get to number 3 of using outside contractors at a discount until the point where we feel like coming in-house is more beneficial.
Thank you, Skippy. Back to you, Francie. You're on mute.
I just wanted to talk about a personal experience that I just had in terms of appraisers and contractors. We're refinancing our property, and the people who are trying to do the refinance could not get a local appraiser, and we've been at it now for 6 weeks. So finally, somebody came in, and their bid to appraise our property, is $1,600. It's pretty much highway robbery. We're talking about maybe 2 or 3 hours of work, and the last most expensive bid before that was $975. So it's really out of control. And contractors also are way, way, way out. So I'm just thinking that if we want to get work done in a timely manner, I mean, maybe all this will flip in 2 or 3 years and everybody will be out of work and they'll be ready to work at a discount for APCHA, but just don't really see that happening. I see contractors, appraisers, home inspectors, all those people way, way out and really jacking up their prices. So that's kind of the experience from which my suggestion came.
That's amazing intel. Follow-up question, which is for staff on that. If we were to give direction as is proposed, is that the type of thing that you'll be looking into before this comes back? And if that was the observation you had, may we already expect you to come back with a different suggestion of in-house for that type of information?
This goes back to Rachel's point about things being inextricably linked. If on the next one we get direction to go with what the board preferred for an option of looking into a qualified pool of contractors, and what we would do specifically on that one would be we would go out and put out a request for qualifications and basically ask the market, does anyone want to do this? And are you willing to provide a discount? The other piece we'd probably do is just put out some feelers to folks who know folks in the industry to kind of get a read on the ground. And I appreciate Francie's point because it does highlight that this is all inextricably linked. So I think at this point, Francie, is your hand new? If not, I can read lips. You're on mute. I thought you said
my hand was not up, and I'm happy if you guys are ready to move on to other things and just put my suggestion aside for a while. I don't have a problem with that at all.
Here's the thing, Francie. I think what I'm seeing, and your real world experience is quite helpful, is that this question here about estimating costs is inextricably linked to this second question about who does the work. And if we come back to the board and say, right, we'll probably go out and ask, are you willing to do this? And, what's happening with bids right now? Like, is it just taking forever to get a bid, or people aren't even providing bids? And your point about, Skippy, your point about the market might be different in 2 to 3 years is probably true, and we're trying to do this in this market, so we'll go with that. So I think Skippy, we're probably ready to call this question and just a kind of consent. Are folks okay moving forward with this one, recognizing if we go down here and the board decides, now we really need to add maintenance staff, then I might come back and re-ask this question, because if we're going to have APCHA maintenance staff do it, then we should probably be doing our own estimating. Thank you.
Why don't we take any questions on number 2, and then once we're done with those, or if there are none, let's take those straw polls, Diane, and try and get some direction. Does that make sense?
I'll do that super quick. Great idea. This one is about finding a contractor, right? It can be expensive. How do we do it? This is much like, so Cindy has issued a request for qualifications for the home inspections, and is getting responses back on who's willing to do it, how much will they do it for. We would go through a similar process of asking people, are you willing? And this one, I think this one's going to be some more conversations as well. Here's what the board said. If those need to be made, who should make those improvements? APCHA develops a pool was the preferred answer. Remember, 7 out of 8 folks answered this survey. And then kind of second option, which had a few people answer this, was add staff to APCHA. So with that, Skippy, I'll hand it back to you. Thank you.
Sure.
Hi, David.
So let's do does anyone have a perspective they want to share with the group before we take a straw poll here, like a case to make for either position? Rachel?
Skippy, I was just going to say, you know, if we get the qualified pool, I think we may end up, and it may be appropriate, to develop some sort of retainer amount for them to be able to commit to do this work with us on a regular basis, and not say, oh, I'll do the work, you know, after I finish this pre-market project or something like that. But it may take incentives like that. I think working with the local contracting community first is going to give us a real taste of what's out there and what we need to do from there. Thank you.
Anybody else want to make the case for the side of going straight to in-house? Okay, I don't see that, Diane. So I think your proposal is the correct one. The one thing that I would add, and I look to the board just for agreement, is if during the due diligence of figuring this out, staff determines that having a pool of contractors is unworkable, I would love to see what comes back to us as a program for in-house, just so we make, you know, 2 steps. 1, because we know that we want to get this done in either case. This is our preference, but, you know, option B, we can move forward with if needed, and along with evidence for why we got there. Okay, not seeing anything else there. So I think you have your straw poll there. So let's go back up to that first question just to double check in. Is there anyone who disagrees that we should also move forward with this sort of matching recommendation from staff? So if you think we should go direct to in-house, please raise your hand and make that case. And Diane, if you could take us to number 3, we are making great progress. Oh, sorry, Francie's hand's up.
Yeah, I'm not going to make a case here. I'm just going to say that I have 3 sons, and they're all in construction right now. So I would be happy to have conversations with them about what they think the market looks like right now and availability and stuff like that, and get back to you with that information.
Yeah, and if you could even connect them with staff, that may be the best direct
That'd be
route.
great. That would be way better. I'll do that.
Save you a few minutes too. All right, Diane, take us through.
I kind of like the mom influence in this, so. Rachel, are you trying to find unmute?
Yeah. One other last thought is, you know, maybe you can get someone who will dedicate, say, 1 or 2 days a week that they are always ours Thursday and Friday for whatever inspections we need, or one day a week. But, I mean, that way we're not moving into full-time, but you could have someone locked down for a committed number of inspections based on how much inventory we have coming in.
But then we have to pay them if there's no work?
Oh, possibly. That's what I'm saying. We may need to put someone on retainer and for a amount of time, something like that.
Good suggestion.
And in this market, that's a real possibility. And I appreciate the discussion and the trust that you're all putting in staff, that we're very much interpreting what you've told us so far as not as this is absolutely what we're doing. You're giving us direction on what to explore. So thank you.
Number 3.
All right, number 3. So we've talked about this in several ways, and what I'm going to do tonight is actually show you an example. And through some discussions we've had that staff has had with Skippy, the reason we're proposing this version is not because it's perfect. It's simply because we think it finds a balance between, we don't want to create a system that penalizes people who've kept up with their property, right? David has shared with us his perspective on, and we've heard from staff. There are lots of folks out there. In fact, I would venture to say, based on at least anecdotal evidence, a majority of folks are doing a good job of keeping up with their property. It's all obviously subjective until you get an inspector to go in. So however, we want to be careful that people who are putting money into their houses and doing work, we don't want to penalize them. If their homes are in really bad shape, then we don't want to reward people with a maximum resale price. And we've heard from the board that we want to be careful about someone who just bought property and there's 20 years of capital improvements that weren't done. How do we protect them? So version A here is just what staff has talked about before. And this number here, this 0.5%, it's a suggested placeholder this could generate X amount of money, but it gives the seller some gain in their capital investment. This other version that I added this week specifically says you could actually cap appreciation. So if somebody's owned a property for 30 years, they've never done anything, and that 0.5% starts adding up, you could actually cap it. Let me show you what these look like. As a reminder, these are the board answers. There were half of the folks who answered this question, so 3 people on the board actually said APCHA should purchase the property and do the repairs. We're not working in that model. We're working in the model of that the seller has some of the responsibility, and up to a point, then we put it on the maximum sale price, which ultimately hits the buyer, but not in the same way that it hits the seller, because it's usually finance dollars. Most folks are not coming in and buying APCHA properties with cash. Here's the example. I'm going to go through it a little bit quickly. I'm happy to go through it and have Cindy talk to it. But basically, this is, and remember, we've got deed restrictions out there, really old ones that have a 6% appreciation. Thankfully, not a lot of them. We have some that are 2.5% or CPI, whichever is lower. As you've heard from Cindy, the average is 2%. We did the math at 2.5% because a lot of the homes do have this specified in the deed restrictions. And as a reminder, this model, when we calculate appreciation, we don't just count like 5 years. We actually look at 5 years and 3 months. So that's why you see the month calculation and the divided by 12 months of the year multiplied by the number of months owned. That's what that's doing there in that calculation. So in this model, where someone purchases a home for $500,000 and they've owned it for 20 years with 2.5% appreciation, I'm not touching what they've done for capital improvements or what those depreciations are. In this model, the maximum sales price for this property would be $750,000. And frequently today, if they've owned the property for 20 years and that's what they bought it for 500 and 2.5%, they would be getting that, because remember the APCHA regulations as they stand, staff is asking about and is kind of pushing for improvements, but no teeth in it that absolutely allows staff to require capital repairs. And by the way, I keep saying capital improvements. I do, and you'll see in the staff report, anytime that's referenced, we are talking capital repairs. Now, in the model that staff has suggested, and again, this number can change.
Hi. Good, how are you?
Not on mute.
Got it?
Please and thank you.
Got the power. That was not Phyllis, by the way. No, poor Phyllis, and she actually figured out what was happening there. It was a technology issue. In this model, and this is a property that would be in disrepair, would have a lot of work to do. This is saying if you went in and said, wow, this property needs $200,000 worth of work, this model would basically create a maximum resale price of $550,000. So the buyer is not going underwater. Rachel's point about refinance is important here. As long as their mortgage is at $500,000, they're not going underwater, and they're getting a tiny bit of appreciation. It's not a lot of appreciation. And then this $200,000 could be applied to the repairs needed. In a case where $250,000 worth of repairs were needed, what would happen in this model would be the owner of the seller of the property is getting a $50,000 appreciation, $200,000 of their maximum sales price is being applied to the repairs, and then $50,000 would be applied to the maximum sales price. So the property then would sell, and sorry, I didn't put this on the slide, I just thought of this. That property would be listed for $800,000, which would be this price, $550 plus $200 plus the $50,000 that was put onto the additional repairs that was put into the maximum sales price, and we list the property at $800. Should I keep going to the other example?
This one.
Go ahead, Skippy.
Just going back to this math so that we're all on the same page, the delta in sale max price is 200. So if we're listing it for 800, that means there's 250 Ks of repairs to do, which all that means is that up to 200,000 of repairs, which is quite a significant amount, we wouldn't expect to see any bump in the price.
That's correct. Go ahead.
That's it. You can move to the next one.
Francie, what Skippy was saying is that right now that property could resell for $750,000, and if we use this model and it only needs $200,000 worth of repair, that property would be sold for $750,000.
Okay.
Next example, same price, same appreciation, owned for 5 years. We just did 5 years because 2 years doesn't really show really much appreciation at all. So somebody buys a house, and they own it for 5 years. The maximum resale price is they had got $62,500 of appreciation over that 5 years. If you did want to have that person have some ownership for capital improvements, in this model, that maximum if in the case where this property needed $50,000 or more, the seller of the property would get a minimum of $512,000. $50,000 could be put towards the capital repairs, and the balance would be put to the sales price. Obviously, in this situation, and it's something we're going to have to address, and we're going to have to do some analysis as staff and bring that back to you. The biggest challenge in this particular case is if it's a property that hasn't been touched for years, it's got $250,000 worth of work that needs to be done. The seller is going to be basically kicking in $50,000 of appreciation. They're only going to get what they bought it for plus $12,000, $12,500, and we would end up adding the difference onto the maximum sales price. That could kick it into a new category, which is obviously a concern. So this is not, again, not without fault. Staff is recommending this model because it seems like the most fair. With that, Skippy, I'll hand it back to you. Skippy, you're on mute. All right, you're still on mute. I'll take it from here. Tom or Rachel, I don't know who had their hand up first.
Tom had his hand up for a while.
Okay, sorry about that. Go ahead, Tom. Tom, you're on mute.
Sorry, I want to work with staff on, this is a complex issue, and I don't want to get bogged down in the details now. But just to let you know that staff and I are going to work on how we make this actually work. But one thing I did want to point out is that since virtually every deed restriction, even the really old ones, have provisions for appreciation. So we can't change that. We can reduce maximum sale price relative to requirements for fixing the units. And that may be, and reduced appreciation may be a way of sort of comparing that to the otherwise allowable sale price. But we can't take away somebody's appreciation if it's in the deed restriction. We have to figure out a way to express that in terms of requirements for fixing the property.
Good point, Tom. Rachel?
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple of points I wanted to make. One, the only thing missing from these examples is the 2% sales commission, which that seller will also be taking out of their limited appreciation or value. And that's 2% of the sales price, not the original. And so that is a significant thing. And I just was going to kind of raise a point I raised before, which is this gets to be too complicated or too costly. I think some people will just say, hey, let somebody else deal with this when I die. Or, you know, I was thinking of moving, but it's too much hassle, or I can't afford to move. I'm physically, financially now trapped in my unit because I can't afford the repairs. And so I think we have to be careful of creating a real roadblock to unit turnover, which is a potential for some people. But the other thing is maybe, and maybe Carson can think about this, or others who deal with, people able to move their money and watch their investments and their interest rates very carefully. But if you were to buy that $500,000 home and you want to get the best interest rate, and so let's put ourselves in the buyer's position going forward of a new home, or one we're not worried about the repairs. But if they put down $500,000, they want to buy a $500,000 home. To get the best interest rates, you put down 20%. That's going to be important as rates rise. So you put $100,000 down. And if you were reduced down to that 0.05% appreciation, you would be earning, you have a potential to only earn $500 a year on your $100,000 that you put into buying the place in the first place. And so I think that's really going to drive a pretty heavy-duty financial decision from a lot of people. You know, I have $100,000 to put down. I may get 3% appreciation, but I may get 0.05. And you could live there for 20 years and come out with $10,000, you know. And so I think there's, you know, we have to be thoughtful about how much we're expecting. And the third thing I just would, you know, and that's just from a buyer's perspective. When they're choosing, is that where I want to buy? Is this what will be best for my family's financial future? Because the home purchase is also a financial decision. But the other thing we haven't worked in here yet, and I think there really is some potential there, is the capital improvements that a homeowner, quote, is allowed, but as we've discussed before, in many units, there's really not anything you can do for a true capital improvement. You can do energy efficiencies and anything that increases some capacity, an extra closet built into an existing size unit. But perhaps if someone has not used and therefore inflated their price by any capital improvements, the 10% that they're allowed, maybe that's where there should be some allowance to allow that for livability standards and upkeep for that seller. I don't know, but I'm just saying, you know, we have this, quote, kind of carrot out there for improvements, but it's not a carrot for upkeep or maintenance or basic. And have we put the incentives in the wrong place? And again, just thinking going forward, is that where we want the incentive to be? It was always there for people to build an extra bedroom when they had a single family home, but you don't have those opportunities to use it in a condo. So I just wanted to throw that out there. But again, I think we should really take a little bit of a thought and look at, you know, how a buyer is going to look at the use of their big money and knowing that there's really no appreciation on it for as long as they live there, potentially.
They're just aware.
Potentially, yeah. And Rachel, that's a really good issue. And do know, right, as staff, I would, the two things I would love is, one is I would love the housing fairy to drop down and pop down $50 million and help us solve this, or help us create a grant program or whatever. Absolutely. This is not perfect, and absolutely willing to look at other models that may work better.
Yeah. I understand what you're saying, Diana. I'm not criticizing your model, but I know the word buying down has come out several times, that as the units rise, and we may, you know, I personally believe that there probably will be public money needed to solve this problem, and we're all continuing to try to solve it without any thought to that right now, and that's all I'll say. But I understand the model, I understand the challenges.
Yeah, and Rachel, here's the thing. I'm not convinced this is the right model, right? If I put myself in a board member's shoes, what we're putting forward as staff is we think this is the closest we can get at this point, short of having other people's money in the game. And you may decide as a board to go back to something David suggested about having a revolving loan program, and that is added on to the maximum resale price at the end. You may go back to that. To your capital repairs piece, the good news on that front is board did give staff direction 4 meetings ago to look at developing an updated deed restriction. As of today, I think Bethany's had been through all the staff review on that one and is planning on bringing that either the first or second week in July to look at. And it is a more generous and tries to also looks at people who have maxed out their capital improvements or maybe never had them in their deed restriction. And so this new model deed restriction, bringing that to the board. So that'll be in July.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Rachel, before we go to Kelly, just to clarify, so we're all on the same page, I heard the request for like the additional pieces that need to interplay with this. in terms of improvements and maintenance and an additional carrot. And I think I heard staff say that's coming. But then I also heard you talk about, is this the right mix of numbers and model? And so what I'm wondering is this a model that you can support, but that we may need to move the numbers on? Or is there another model that you would prefer that you're proposing to the board in place of this one?
Thanks for the question, Skippy. I don't have another model to propose, but I continue to want to look at the issue from a 360-degree direction, as I kind of said before. So I'm looking at it to say, what will this do in terms of unit turnover? Will it, increase unit turnover or slow unit turnover down? I'm looking at this in terms of even our potential buyers. Who will want to who has the disposable income to make a $50,000 down payment and know that, hey, I'll pay property taxes on it forever, but I'll do a lot of repairs along the way as I should, but they'll depreciate back out. And at the end of the day, what is my return on my money? Because a lot of buyers think about that. And I think that in some way ends up being part of the community composition. And finally, I really hate to be in a position where we charge a certain, let's say the first turn of sellers, a really significant amount of money out of their appreciation. And then we add on more, and then we buy the units back down and we start putting public money into it at a different point. And those people who may have worked here 30 or 40 years are saying, did I get a raw deal? Now you're putting money into the projects. Now you're not penalizing the sellers. I think kind of talking to a few sellers might be more informative as well, or potential sellers. I know we're all thinking of some of the really bad cases, and as they say, bad cases make for bad law. I just don't want to see us go to such a punitive thing that someone really looks at it and says, I'd be better off renting. I'll let the landlord pay the property taxes. I don't need a permanent place in this community after all, because I'm just going to be here for a few years. And we defeat the whole purpose of a permanent community base. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying. So I'm hearing that we can move forward with a model like this, but there are a lot of other things that staff should be looking at in detail and either coming back as incorporated into this, or at bare minimum recognizing that those things will also need to be solved and integrated for in some form of sequence. Just correct me if that's...
You're going to end up with defending some of the first lawsuits. I hate to even put it that way, but I recall Colette Penn was a county commissioner and lived in Lone Pine. And when she went to sell her unit, she sued that the maximum resale value should include all the contributions she'd made to the capital reserves for the condos. And I can imagine that this sort of money at stake, potentially, you're going to have to defend this in court, at least for the first few times. And, you'll want to make sure you got it right when you were going into court, because that's where a case would be made by an attorney saying, look, they've only...
Did we lose everybody?
1,250, and they want these people to pay for that out of their appreciation. So I think you're going to have some real challenges going forward.
Perfect, thank you.
Just to highlight something, Skippy, because I think this is an important juncture. Thinking about if staff moves forward on starting to go through all of these details, right? And that's a lot of conversation, and then it's a lot to bring back to the board. That, from a timing perspective, I think it actually works because the board will see the new proposed deed restriction, and when we bring it to you, it is largely what staff recommends. There's also room in there, and we expect board to put your own stamp on it. But then, as Rachel pointed out, we're going to need to make sure we include those capital repair allowances in the model, and as well as the 2% sales fee. And then I do hopefully at that point, now we're talking kind of August timeframe, we'll start to see some inspection reports. We're going to get an idea of what some of those inspections are looking like, and some of what that first turn. I don't ever want to take my eyes off the ball on that first sale, and that there is a disproportionate responsibility on the first seller. Thank you.
Thank you. Just so everyone knows, just got texted in like a half hour ago from Rick that he wants us all to know that he likes the path Diane is taking us down to achieve consensus, ! And supports staff direction. Kelly.
See if I can remember everything that I had 15 minutes ago. I mean, I want to, you know, I'd like to see the model built out a little bit more, particularly with the addition of somebody's allowable improvements as we currently have in the regulations, because I don't think that we are contemplating removing that. If we are, I've missed that part of the conversation, because I think that that can matter in some of this math as well. And then, you know, I want to just tease out what I think are kind of separate but connected goals. And I think some of that is just the fact that we have an expectation on the seller to have maintained their property throughout their life of ownership as one thing that we're trying to articulate in this program. But I think it's separate but connected to the fact that as, you know, broader community, we may also have a goal and value into the preservation of existing affordable housing, you know, on its own merits. And so I don't necessarily want to tie up this program in trying to link those inextricably, because I think that this program can balance the fairness and can put expectations that are clearly articulated on the seller. And I also think we can have a separate conversation recognizing that, like, there will be some of these outliers that, you know, won't fit neatly in this program, and yet there will still be merit in preserving that affordability. And, you know, so I don't want to use the worst case scenarios necessarily, but I don't want to say we're not going to address them either, because I think that there is a separate conversation to have. That may not be APCHA's conversation, that may be the city and county's conversation, but, you know, let's put our values into a program. Let's rebalance the expectations for everybody currently in or trying to enter the program, and, you know, deal with those bigger outliers in a little bit of a separate way, is what I think. So I do want to see this model built out a little bit, but I think it is trying to sort of fairly strike that general, you know,
raise the hand
of everyone who this would affect.
Ready?
Yeah. Francie.
Okay, I'm going to try to say this in a way that is as clear as I can. I want to counter, as the devil's advocate, Rachel's compassionate approach to the working class, which is lovely, and I really appreciate it, and I think it's what APCHA is all about. But and I am concerned that somebody would put that much money into a unit and only come out with $10,000. However, when you get a housing unit that's valued at $633 per square foot, and it's 1,000 square feet, it's valued at $633,000, and the Pitkin County employee is getting it for about half of that. So let's assume it's a $300,000 difference or a $250,000 difference, whatever it is, that APCHA and the city and the county are making up so that this employee can live in a unit which is actually worth $633,000. Well, that's a pretty big interest-free loan to be able to live in that unit. And as I say, I'm being the devil's advocate. I'm not speaking from my heart. I'm speaking from my head. But so that's a pretty big loan over the life of the ownership of that unit, whether it's 5 years or 20 years. And I do think that that compensates for the lack of money that you get to take out when you sell that unit. Is that clear?
Yeah, Fancy, that's super clear. And I also want to just thank you for playing the devil's advocate role. It's one that can be uncomfortable to play, but it is so critical to good sense making as a group. So thank you for putting yourself out there to do that, and we'll make sure to honor that and not attack it as if it's your position.
Yeah. No, and I'd love to say, Francine, I really appreciate that. I think that's the push and pull of this. The only conundrum I'm running into is we're seeing that person being sold a $300,000 home that's valued at $633,000, and then telling them on that limited income, which is why we sold them a $300,000 home, that they have to maintain a $600,000 home. So that's the challenge there, is that we're asking people to maintain something that costs far more to build than they originally purchased it for, and we're taking all of that back out of their appreciation to make up the difference. That's what concerns me, is that there's an ability to upkeep the subsidized portion.
I get that. And the real problem is not the resale value of the unit, it's the income of the employees. That's exactly the real problem.
That's right. There you go. Now, David. The hand is up for David, not me.
Thanks, Rachel. David, do you want to jump in? I had Kelly up too, and I was going to make a quick comment.
Yeah, let Kelly go ahead.
I was just going to
I'll just be really quick on this. Just similar to this point, I don't know what people's motivations are necessarily to get into affordable housing. I know for me personally, like the opportunity to build equity rather than to, pay a landlord every month was really motivating. So I don't know. I mean, I guess my expectations of getting into APCHA weren't for big appreciation at whatever point my family and I, my husband and I sell, but to be able to like recoup the money that we've put in over time rather than just throw away tens of thousands of dollars of rent for a whole lifetime of work. That's all.
David.
Yeah, there's an awful lot going on in this conversation, obviously. And I think it's one that's going to take more communication and more information. Perhaps we should bring in professionals, such as some real estate people or construction people for some of these issues. But it also feels to me like we're going a little overboard because of the Ajax trailer situation. We're overreacting to some of this about how much pain the owner should pay for not keeping everything as it was when he purchased it. I just think this is a much deeper discussion that's got to go on with more input and more consideration of situations that some of these sellers may be in.
Yes.
Thank you, David. That actually supports the don't use the extremes, and I think that's a good reminder. And you're also correct, right? This is a wide-ranging discussion. I'm finding it really valuable and getting a lot out of it. I do want to highlight something that Francie brought up, and that is what is the board's driving value, and what is that overarching goal? And I really appreciate, Francie, that you brought that up, because what I realized at that particular moment was I have not asked you what goals, right? There are values that underlie every decision you make, and what objective or what goal are you trying to reach? This model is primarily focused on the board's desire to not let the problem get any worse where there are problems, right? It's to get the homes into good shape. That's what this responds to. It may not be the goal of the board simply to do that, right? It might be, I mean, this also tries to find a balance between, Kelly, what you talked about, which is very real, that part of when people tell me this should be 100% rental program, I'm like, no, you are getting people into home ownership, which is how most Americans grow their wealth, and having some appreciation is important. This does potentially take away, and Tom's point is a valid one, we can't frame it as we're reducing your appreciation. It's a, how are we going to pay for those? But I do think the board, it's important for the board to have a discussion about what is your overarching goal in this program. Thank you.
Thanks, Diane. I just, anyone can respond directly to Diane. Otherwise, we haven't heard from Carson, and I wanted to make sure you had the opportunity to weigh in here. I know this has been a strong point of advocacy for you for a long time, this program.
Yeah, thanks, Skippy. You know, I mean, I think Rachel makes a really good point about, you know, if we're asking people to, you know, to go out into the free market and maintain properties, you know, in the example that was used, double the cost that they paid, but they still have to go into the free market for all the capital repairs. So, you know, I'm in agreement with what Rachel has said on this.
Yeah, thank you. You know, I'll just having listened to everyone say that I think what staff has outlined is a really good scaffolding. I think it puts the primary onus of cost on the individual or individuals who have caused the harm, and balances that with the necessity and fairness of moving a unit and changing some goal lines, frankly. I don't know if the numbers are exactly right. My initial inclination was, why should anyone get any appreciation if they've so mismanaged their unit? But I think the case has been made clear as to why that's necessary from a systemic situation to make sure that we have turnover, et cetera. I think all of the requests for additional things that tie into this are very important, are things that will have to be resolved, and are things that I would ask staff think about before this comes back. I would not ask that every one of those be part of this. It may be that we need to do some things before the next thing, but it will be important to know that staff understands what those other things are with a plan to get there. I think we should expect this, we should insist that this program is better than what we currently have, and expect it to be imperfect. This is a big change, and we're going to learn as we go. And I think that needs to be okay. I think that's a feature, not a bug. So that's sort of my general feeling around this is staff's direction is the correct one. And let's make sure we're looking at all those other interrelated things and determining which ones we should and shouldn't plug in now. Is there anyone else who'd like to offer some additional thoughts? Or we can just sort of ask Diane to wrap it up by kind of taking another little straw poll here. Okay. Diane, do you want to try and wrap us up here by reflecting everything you've heard from the board in terms of discussion, and then we'll do a straw poll until we get to, we all agree that is in fact the direction from the board.
So, and before I do that, simply because Rachel and David are at a disadvantage because of the power outage, I wanted to confirm that you all have an input before we go there.
Can you say that again? It was a little muffled.
No. I'm going to turn off my...
And maybe unshare your screen as well, so we can, well, I guess we won't be able to see you if you turned off your thing, but...
No, I turned off my video and I'll unshare, sorry. People to school or summer camp and watch movies. Can you hear me?
No.
Yes, we can hear you.
I can't.
Okay, I can switch my internet source if you need me to.
That's better. I think you're moving towards the computer.
Okay, before we go there, I wanted to know if Rachel and David had any additional input simply because they're sharing a computer. I wanted to make sure I didn't cut that off. Okay, and somebody give me a quick audio check. Is this okay?
I hear you.
Yeah. You know, I was just going to say the last thing I would add is I think you'll have some situations in much older ownership where under this sort of program, you could be expecting more repairs than the unit costs them to begin with. And there's a point at which we're trying to make old cars into brand new cars. They can become more valuable over time as collectors, but I'm not so sure it's the same as this. And then, you know, I was just a little nervous about taking this all down so low for the livability standards when someone could move into a unit and the HOA could be so deficient they could be hit with a $10,000 or $15,000 special assessment right off the bat. And that was, you know, I know we have to keep them separate, but I'm just saying you might want to leave a little money in the well for how we deal with deficient HOAs and the percentage out of appreciation that might need to go there.
Yeah, thank you. And before I will jump in, Skippy, to where you suggested about giving a quick summary and then call for a straw poll. I will say as we've gone through this and as the board has had these discussions and as Cindy and Bethany and I and as well as Pam have and Tom discuss these on a daily basis, I do think the ideal scenario is outside funding to help address that first sale, that first resale, that first seller problem. I think we're all going to have to keep an eye to that. You know, Sarah Ott has around the blank assigned to watching for federal dollars were available. Kelly, I know you and Maddie, you can drop that down. That's okay. Thank you, though.
Diane, I'm sorry to interrupt, but my computer is at 5%. If it goes off, I will try to get into my phone. But if I'm unable to, straw poll for staff direction plus board comments from me.
Do you want to do a straw poll first?
No, I'd rather you reflect first, so we're all doing a straw poll on the same thing. I will work to my phone if I need to.
Okay, so just that first, just to reiterate, that first seller is a major piece. My notes are very detailed, so I will try to make it a little more high level and just summarize it as I have lots of notes here that are things that when we come back as staff that we're going to be a multi-page document, right? And it starts with things like in the earlier discussion about having adding to the deed restriction, notifying after refinancing. But then things like when will the work be completed? At what point in the process are we going to sell? How do we prevent lowball bids? Making sure we get bids from the owner, from contractors and not necessarily from the handyman owner and his cousin. Making sure we have a recourse again on lowball bids. And are we going to allow an option for the owner to cure a repair that needs to be done? Let's say the owner is in construction and is qualified to do the work. Brandy is going to connect us with some family members and some folks who, more importantly, are very experienced in the building and the trades to share information, and we will need to be doing that as staff as well. The question about incentives or retainers for contractors, I think that if we are going to get ourselves to the point where we've got incentives, that's going to be an important point about how do we make sure that it's worth it for the contractors. Inspectors. Adding to the examples that we showed today, adding the 2% sales commission, as well as
we bring back the deed restriction probably in the July timeframe, first or second meeting, I can't remember, but making sure we account for those and show that math too about allowed capital improvements. The very real questions of what do we think the real impacts will be on resale, and also that important question of the return on my money. Kelly's point about why people buy an affordable home is a very real issue. In big highlights in my notes is that first sale, that first turn. That model. I do want to very much make sure we're having a discussion with the board about what are the underlying values and your primary goals in this program. If the primary goal is to get the homes repaired, the program may tweak based on that. I'm not going to slow down this discussion by having that in at this point. And then, of course, I have in my own notes, the perfect model is a hybrid one, and the initials I have down are OPM, standing for other people's money. Thank you.
Okay, so the question is first, is there anyone who has any alteration or a disagreement with that summary? If so, please raise your hand. Okay, that looks like agreement on the summary. So then please raise your hand if you do not agree with that summary as direction. So a hand down is, yes, I agree with what was just said to move forward. You have uniform direction, Diane. Thank you. Thank you to all of staff. This is really transformative and complicated work and really extremely well led, and thank you.
Thank you. I will make sure at every board meeting I provide you with an update on where we are on this. I may have questions that we bring to you in this process, or questions that you really need some nuance or a little bit of board direction on, should we go this way or this way. We will absolutely start on this, given that we are working on hiring the executive director, and my perspective on APCHA is that all of the additional work is that's pretty maxed out in what we do on a day-to-day basis. So I just want to make sure that I'm setting appropriate expectations. We are going to jump on this. At earliest, it's probably going to be August before we bring something forward. However, I'm hopeful that I will give you updates along the way. This is big, and I appreciate all of your thoughtful discussion, the time you've taken to really read through the packets and all the input today. And again, this is not a final decision as discussed at the beginning. This is simply an initial direction to get staff moving down a path. We may hit a dead end. We're hopeful at this point that come back with meaningful information for you. Thank you.
Thanks, Diane. I think we've chosen the same tunnel. There's light at the end of it, and it's just a matter of continuing to walk. We will get there. As you bring back updates, maybe the way to do that would be bullet points if it's going to be in director's comments, but keep it to that and pair it with an info-only memo for people to read so that it doesn't take up half of our meeting, because I'm sure that there will be much interest. Well, beautiful. So we'll close that section. We'll turn it over for optional board of directors. That's us. Comments. I'll ask you to raise your hand. And if you guys would permit me, I will go first, because I'm not sure that my computer will last to the end of this, and then you guys can continue. Is that okay with everyone? No one's offended? Okay, great. So I have a couple things here. The first thing is, this is sort of the first big chunk of sausage making that we've taken on. There's many others that we've identified as a board. So what I would love is if you have any feedback on how this has gone so far from a process standpoint, what's been great, what has not worked, what could be better, please email me. You can put it in body email. We can schedule a call. I'd love to get your feedback so that the next big chunk we take on to make sausage with, we can make improvements where you see them. Second thing I wanted to bring forward, this is very exciting. I was approached by, and I know others were as well, I know I spoke to Rachel and Diane, maybe others. CORE, Mona Newton from CORE approached and said, hey, love that you guys are moving Standards for Sellers program forward. Environmental goals are top in our community. The city and county, I believe as well, has identified residential structures and energy leaking as a primary negative part of our energy portfolio. Bringing things up to standards would be one of the biggest things we can do to reduce our CO2 standard. And so what they offered is at every inspection that we do, we can also do an energy assessment. That costs $500 per turn. CORE is willing to front $400 of that. The remaining $100 would fall to APCHA. That's a total, based on average turnover, that's a total of $5,000 to $7,000 a year to inventory the thing that could have the biggest impact on our environment. Staff is supportive of that. We don't need any specific vote. I am supportive of it. Rachel can speak for herself, but I understand is also supportive. And the question is just sort of straw poll. Is that something that everyone would like to see happen? And staff can then include that in budget requests upcoming to get that up and running. So I'll kind of open the floor there for thoughts or feedback or just general thumbs up. Kelly.
Yeah, I mean, my hand's up for other comments, but I will comment on this as well because I don't know if we need to do it as a blanket approach. We might think about being a little more selective there. I'm not sure if I'm living in a Burlingame unit that's 5 years old. Does it need an energy audit? I just think it's a fair question to ask if there's like some threshold of when we would want to pay for that or not pay for it.
Totally fair. Anybody else like to comment on that? Okay. Would I hear non-comment as general support and staff can look at what Kelly mentioned there along the way? Francie?
I am fully in support of this, and I think given the city and the county's commitment to combating climate change, that this would be a really important part of that. And APCHA, as far as I know so far, has been not one of the things that we've looked at targeting for sustainability and, reducing our carbon footprint. So I'm fully in favor of this, and I really commend CORE for coming forward and suggesting this. And $100 seems like a deal.
Definitely. $5,000 to $7,000 a year is not much around here, so.
No.
Not hearing anyone else. Staff, does that work for you as direction?
It does, and what we'll do is we'll bring back to the board for your direction tonight. We'll work with CORE and bring back what that might look like, what the cost might look like. And I will give you a heads up that my recommendation, and this is a single person, I have not talked to the rest of staff about this. My recommendation is make this mandatory because I think many of you know that you get into an affordable unit and all of a sudden it's not insulated or your energy costs are going through the roof, and that is part of what your living costs are. And I think if we had a mandatory inspection, you would then start to create transparency not only around what condition is this home in, but also what is this home going to cost me to own and operate, which is critical. And I think there's a really good model here, but that was my personal input. Also, just a quick update for those on the energy piece. I just got a Pitkin alert that says we're aware of widespread outages in Aspen. At this point, Aspen Electric is not part of that energy outage. They are fully operational right now. It looks like it's limited to a Holy Cross issue on Midland, and so just thought I'd add that in. Thank you. We'll come back with that, and thank you for that direction.
Thanks, Diane. Two more small things, just looking at our packets, we initially had the long-term agenda scheduled out with items. We kind of had pulled that and just went to future meeting because this first sausage making session took longer than we thought. I'm going to circle back with staff, look at those things and try to start plugging those things back in just so that both we and the public have a new expectation around that. So look for that to be forthcoming. Diane, look for some time with me on that in the coming week or two. Let's send an email out to do that. Probably take us 30 minutes. And then the last thing I just want to mention is we just did our board appointments at the city council level. Rachel is going to be stepping in as our voting member from the city. I'll be here to support her. So I just wanted to, even though we haven't signed the document yet, I just want to say, congratulations, and we all have a chance to welcome Rachel. She's basically been our eighth voting member anyways, highly influential, and I think even more so to come. So just wanted to just let everyone know that, which is great. Congrats, Rachel. And with that, I'll turn it over to Kelly.
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to take a few minutes to report out on some of my recent conversations related to funding opportunities for capital improvements as we've been discussing. And so I have spoken with our local Department of Local Affairs housing representative, who kind of handles the portfolio of Division of Housing grant making. And I also reached out to the Gunnison Housing Authority director, who I serve on another board doing statewide housing policy stuff, to get her input on what they're doing and what they've started to stand up over there. And so the Division of Local Affairs does grant funds to local governments to establish loan portfolios for the rehabilitation of affordable housing. And that deals with owner-occupied housing. It can be multifamily housing. It can be single-family housing. They do not generally support loans for mobile homes that are not on fixed foundations. And that application process typically looks like, the applicant would present some needs assessment and would say, this is the type of portfolio we're looking to stand up. We want to do, say, 10 loans in the first 10 years, 20 loans in the first year, 20 loans in the second year, 30 loans in the third year, something along those lines. And that money is a grant from DOLA to the local government, who then creates a loan portfolio for occupants of affordable housing to apply for. The program requires the establishment of some underwriting guidelines for, both the loan recipient and, in our case, the housing authority to follow, and generally is loaned for folks at 80% and less AMI. Now, there's a broader conversation about expanding that program up to a higher AMI, 100%, 100, maybe even up to 120%. And they do consider waivers for certain things. So, for example, Gunnison County had obtained a waiver for loans of up to $5,000 for emergency loans. So somebody's furnace, needs to be replaced, somebody's roof has a hole, crash through it. Those type of things that that could go up to a higher level of AMI. Gunnison is treating it like a revolving loan so that they have money in their account at all times. It does not necessarily, DOLA does not require that. The Housing Authority could decide to create a grant program, perhaps for low incomes or something like that. And generally they're loaning at a 0 to 3% interest rate. So, I think this is a program we should consider. And their loan application process is July 1st of every year. So I obviously think it's not appropriate for right now, but something to be thinking about in the next 12 months, and thinking about, what what loan underwriting rules would we want? Our colleague in Gunnison said, generally you just take what works from somebody else and see if you can apply it to your own community. There's always the opportunity for other public money that isn't connected to DOLA's AMI limits to also go into such a program that could fund up to 100, 120%, whatever AMIs, so contributions from the city or county for such a loan program for those higher income loan needs. But again, this is really to facilitate the maintenance of affordable housing and these livability and life safety repairs. And so that's my general takeaway from those conversations. I think we should pursue it in the next 12 months.
Thank you, Kelly. Guys, I had to move off my computer, so I'm no longer hosting. I can't see hands, so if anyone else wants to comment, just jump in.
Kelly, this is Diane, I wanted to say thank you. I really appreciate that groundwork, and I know we're going to have to figure out as APCHA staff. Cindy, Bethany, and I will be starting operating budget discussions, and I've heard from some board members and that we do need staff, and we've got to figure out how to create the bandwidth to go after these kind of dollars on not just a Ron's looking out for grants, but on a APCHA basis. So I appreciate you doing that legwork and you being in case on that. Thanks.
Anybody else want to jump in? Otherwise, we could take a motion to adjourn.
I'm going to jump in for just a second here. I really appreciate the opportunity. First, I'd like to say, yeah, I am totally with Francine and others on the energy efficiency. And there have been policies in some places, I don't know that any of our banks have them here, where you actually would be able to qualify for a loan with a lower income when they know that your energy costs are going to be lower in your unit. So that can be a really important element for people. What I really mostly want to thank everyone who has acknowledged the structural deficit that we're really dealing with. I think that's part of what we've been dancing around, and I see Diane having really acknowledged it with the term the first seller. And you're talking, I imagine, about first sellers with their current deed restrictions and are catching up on all these matters. And I do believe there may be some public money required or needed. And that's when, for me, looking for outcomes of the program, other than the stated normal APCHA goals, it's fairness and equity. And so I want to make sure that, whoever these first sellers are, we're treating them fairly, and that, the second sellers don't somehow get a better deal than the first ones did because we've realized some roadblocks or something like that. And, so I think some real time should be put into understanding that structural deficit, the difference between what someone's income would allow them to buy, what we've sold them, and what we expect them to be able to do for upkeep for the full cost. But, we're getting there. And, as long as people really know what they're getting into and don't face something in their later years of life that they were counting on for part of their retirement or whatever. The city is looking at a lot of things about the Wheeler Opera House, but one of the things in preparing for discussing the Wheeler Opera House, Rhett, is going to be a presentation from Human Services. And I think that one thing we're going to hear is that we've got a lot of people who've been able to stay in the community because they had low-income rental or low-income purchases, but they may not have had a lot saved up for retirement and on those jobs and those incomes. And so there's multiple effects of a housing program on a community, and we need to keep those in account. So that's really all I wanted to say. Is I'm glad that we're acknowledging that structural deficit, and we're naming it, and we're giving it the recognition that it's going to be a little tricky dealing with the first sellers. And perhaps it's been a challenge for me. I want to apologize to anyone and everyone if I've been too wordy at times, but I think words were about the only tool I had on the board, so I may have overused them. I apologize. Thank you.
Anyone else want to jump in or make a motion?
Sorry, Skippy, this is Diane. I do want to do a level check. Is everyone clear that when we're talking about first seller, it's a point in time where we're looking at implementing a program, and when we do it, at that particular point in time, the next person who sells, right? The first person who sells that particular unit, they have a different challenge than the second person. And, you know, I appreciate this discussion because I think it's also, as we start to get home inspection data, we may be able to actually start to model what would it look like, or maybe we can do that through discussions with construction folks. We may be able to model what is that challenge, potential challenge, or a couple examples of that first, what that first person might face versus their next person in 10 years. And to be clear, that is a specific request Rachel has made. Thank you.
I just want to jump in on this point. You know, I also think it could be helpful if, you know, staff, you determine the burden, but if it would also be helpful to sort of track what a buy down leveling might look like as well. And I don't think it's just buy down of the units that have a ton of work. I also think it's like buy down of the units that are like grossly undervalued for their current category. You know, those things may level each other out. I'm not sure they will, I doubt they will, but without looking at it, I don't know if we'll know that. So just another kind of data point and to keep in mind.
Molly, can you just so I'm clear, the buying down something that is overvalued? I don't think I was clear on that.
Yeah, so something that is a category 3, say, but it's selling for way less than what our current category 3 income levels and max, you know, and minimum and maximum sales levels are just because of the age of the unit, et cetera.
Great, thank you.
All right, not hearing any more comments, not being able to see hands. Let's do a last request. Anyone want to add any last comments? Otherwise, someone can make a motion to adjourn.
I'll move to adjourn.
Anybody want a second?
Please.
I can't.
David, I'm looking at you.
I second the motion.
Beautiful. With 13 minutes to spare, even with the power outage. Well done, people. All right, let's read the roll, Cindy.
Okay, Skippy?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
And Carson?
Yes.
Well, that's it.
Good work, y'all. Have a beautiful, beautiful day.
Thank you all.
Bye, GrassRoots.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
I'm sorry, I don't stay.